Alien warrior left for dead after losing her legs. Only a human marine refused to leave her. HFY. The sky over the ruined planet burned red and black. Smoke covered everything. Broken ships lay scattered across the land like dead animals. The ground shook again and again as distant explosions echoed through the empty valleys. This world had once been full of life, but now it was only a battlefield. The alien warrior moved forward through the fire with heavy breaths. Her armor was cracked and blackened, but she still held her weapon tight. She had trained her whole life for war. She had followed every rule, every order. Retreat was shameful. Surrender was worse than death. Her people were losing ground. Human soldiers pushed from the west with machines and loud weapons. Their movements were fast and organized. They did not stop. They did not hesitate. The alien warrior had seen many enemies before, but these humans were different. They kept moving forward even when wounded, even when afraid. She aimed and fired again. One human fell. Another took his place. The noise was endless. Then the ground exploded beside her. A flash of white light swallowed everything. The force threw her into the air. Her body slammed into broken stone. Pain rushed through her like fire. She screamed, but the sound was lost under the roar of battle. When the smoke cleared, she tried to move. She could not feel her legs. She looked down. Where her legs should have been, there was only ruined armor, torn flesh, and blood soaking into the dirt. The pain came a moment later, sharp and cruel. She cried out again, her hands clawing at the ground. Around her, her fellow warriors were pulling back. Orders were being shouted. Transports were landing farther away. The line was breaking. She raised her arm and called out, her voice weak. No one looked back. One warrior glanced at her from a distance. Their eyes met for a second. Then the warrior turned away and ran. The alien warrior understood. She was finished. A legless soldier was a burden, a lost cause. There was no time, no mercy. Her weapon slipped from her hand. The sounds of battle slowly moved farther away. Soon, only distant explosions remained. Smoke drifted over her, hiding the sky. She lay there, bleeding, waiting for death. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time lost meaning. Then she heard footsteps. Heavy boots crushed rubble nearby. She forced her eyes open. A human soldier moved through the smoke, his rifle raised. His armor was scratched and dirty. One side of his helmet was cracked, showing part of his face. Blood ran down his arm, but he kept moving. She tried to reach for her weapon. Her hand barely moved. The human saw her. He froze. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Enemy and enemy. Her chest rose and fell fast. She waited for the shot. It would be quick. That would be acceptable. The human did not shoot. He stepped closer, slowly, carefully, his weapon lowered just a little. He saw her injuries. His eyes widened. She bared her teeth, trying to look fierce even as pain tore through her body. If he was going to kill her, she would not beg. The human spoke into his communicator. His voice was tense. He received an answer almost at once. His posture stiffened. He looked around, then back at her. She could not understand his words, but she knew the tone. Orders, clear and final. The human hesitated. Then he shook his head. He moved toward her again. Fear hit her like another explosion. She tried to crawl back, dragging herself with her arms, leaving blood behind. Her strength faded fast. The human stopped and raised one empty hand. palm open. He spoke again, slower this time, his voice calmer. She did not understand the sounds, but something in his tone confused her. He knelt a short distance away. Carefully, he reached into his pack and pulled out a small device. He placed it on the ground and slid it toward her. She stared at it, unsure. The device made a soft sound. A light appeared. Painkillers flowed into her system through a spray that touched her skin. The pain dulled slightly, enough for her to breathe. Why would an enemy do this? The human pulled out a bandage and began to work on her wounds. His movements were fast but careful. He avoided her eyes, focused on stopping the bleeding. She watched him closely, waiting for betrayal. None came. Suddenly, a loud warning echoed across the battlefield. Human voices shouted. The ground trembled again. The human stood up quickly and looked around. Smoke was thinning. Enemy scanners would find them soon. He looked down at her again. She expected him to leave. Instead, he crouched and slipped his arms under her body. She panicked and struck his shoulder weakly. He grunted but did not let go. He lifted her, her blood soaking into his armor. The pain flared again, but she stayed conscious. He began to run. Each step sent pain through her body. The world blurred. She clutched his armor, more from fear of falling than trust. Shots rang out behind them. Something struck the ground near his feet. He changed direction without slowing. The alien warrior felt something strange inside her chest. Confusion, anger, fear. Why was he doing this? The human reached a broken wall and dropped behind it. He set her down gently and pressed himself against the stone, breathing hard. His communicator crackled again. He answered quickly, his voice sharp. The alien listened. She could tell he was arguing. He ended the call and slammed his fist into the wall. Then he looked at her. For the first time, he met her eyes fully. His eyes were tired, afraid, but determined. He pointed to her legs, then to the sky where aircraft roared overhead. He shook his head. Then he pointed to himself and tapped his chest. He was not leaving. More explosions rocked the area. Dust fell from above. The wall shook. The human lifted her again. His breathing was heavy now. Blood from his wounds soaked through his sleeve. They moved through broken streets, hiding when machines passed overhead. Once, they pressed into a dark space beneath collapsed metal, while enemy voices spoke nearby. The alien warrior held her breath, her heart pounding. The human shielded her body with his own. At last, they reached a deep crater far from the main fighting. Inside it was a small tunnel, likely made by earlier bombardment. The human carried her inside and set her down. He collapsed against the wall, breathing hard. For a moment, neither moved. The alien warrior studied him. He was bleeding badly now. His hands shook as he pulled out another bandage and wrapped his arm. She realized something then. By saving her, he had stayed behind. By staying behind, he was now trapped. Outside, engines roared. The battle was ending. This area would soon be erased from the map. The human looked at the tunnel entrance, then back at her. He gave a tired, small smile. She did not understand his words when he spoke again, but she understood the meaning. You are not alone. The ground shook once more as distant bombs fell. In the burning ruins of an alien world, a human marine sat beside a fallen enemy and waited for whatever came next. Smoke and fire still covered the sky when the alien warrior woke again. Pain stabbed through her body, sharp and cruel, and she realized she could not move her legs. Her arms trembled as she tried to shift, but it was useless. She groaned quietly, forcing herself to breathe slowly. The human marine was still there, sitting beside her, his helmet pushed back. He was cleaning his weapon, his hands steady despite the chaos that had not fully left the ruins outside. The warrior wanted to speak, to ask why he had saved her, but her throat was dry and her voice weak. Instead, she glared at him with her glowing eyes. Trust was a word she had never given to humans, and yet he had stayed. The human noticed her movement and looked up. He smiled faintly, just enough to show he was aware she was awake. He pointed to the small pack he had brought, and then to her wounds. His gestures were clear. He wanted her to let him help. Slowly, she nodded. She could not move, and the fire of pain in her body made her understand that this human might be her only chance to survive. He knelt beside her and gently worked on her injuries. Bandages, sprays, and antiseptics were applied, all without a word. His hands were careful, almost reverent, as if touching her could cause more damage than help. Time passed, but not a single word was spoken between them. Outside, the sound of distant gunfire and explosions still rumbled through the broken landscape. Occasionally, a shadow passed over the tunnel entrance, and the human would look up sharply. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, not aggressive, not commanding, just human, just a sound meant for understanding. "We need to move soon," he said. His accent was rough, and the words were simple, but the meaning was clear. "They will find us." The alien warrior tried to nod, but could not fully manage it. She did not understand everything he said, but she understood the urgency. The human had risked everything to carry her to this place. Now he wanted to move again, though he was injured himself. He lifted her carefully, supporting her weight as they made their way through the tunnel. Each step caused her pain to flare, but she forced herself not to scream. The human's pace was slow but steady, and he stopped often to listen. Once, he ducked behind a pile of rubble as a patrol passed by above. He pressed her close to him, shielding her body with his own. For the first time, the alien warrior felt a strange emotion. It was not fear, not anger. It was confusion. Why was he helping her? She had killed humans before. She had fought them with no hesitation. And yet here he was, risking everything to save her life. Hours passed as they moved through the ruins. She could hear his breathing, shallow and ragged, and it reminded her that he too was human, fragile. But unlike the rest of her people, he had chosen to stay behind. He had chosen her. They reached an abandoned building that had been partially destroyed. The walls were cracked and windows were blown out, but it offered some cover. The human laid her down gently on a broken floor and leaned against the wall. His eyes scanned the outside, constantly alert. The alien warrior stared at him. She wanted to speak, but again her throat failed her. Finally, she tried to push herself up slightly. He immediately put a hand on her shoulder, stopping her. "Ah." His eyes softened, and he shook his head. She understood. Any movement now could make her worse. She had to wait. Time passed slowly. The air was thick with smoke and dust. Outside, distant explosions reminded them that the war continued. Inside, the silence was heavy, almost deafening. The alien warrior felt shame. She had lost her legs. She had lost her honor. Her people would consider her useless, and yet here was a human, treating her as if she still mattered. The human spoke again, this time pointing to a small communicator device. He tapped it gently, and then made motions that seemed to explain something to her. She studied him closely. Slowly, she realized he was trying to tell her that he had called for help, for supplies, or evacuation. He was trying to save them both. She did not know how to react. Her species never trusted humans, and she had no reason to start now. But watching him, watching how carefully he treated her, she felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Gratitude. Suddenly, a shadow passed outside. The human immediately ducked, pressing her to the ground. The alien warrior could hear voices, foreign and sharp. Enemy patrols were close. She tensed, ready to fight despite her injuries, but the human stopped her. He held her down, signaling her to stay quiet. The voices passed, footsteps faded. The human breathed a sigh of relief and looked at her. His eyes were serious. He gestured for her to stay still, then moved toward a small pile of rubble at the corner of the room. From there, he pulled out a device with a soft glow. She watched him carefully, unsure what it was. He pressed buttons, and a soft hum filled the air. Lights blinked on a small screen. He turned to her and pointed at it, then gestured for her to relax. Slowly, she allowed herself to trust him. The device seemed to scan her body, as if measuring her injuries. A warm sensation spread through her torso, dulling the pain. For the first time, she felt hope. Hours turned into night. Outside, the sky had darkened, but the fires still burned on the horizon. The alien warrior drifted in and out of consciousness. She would wake to find the human still there, checking her bandages, adjusting her position. Sometimes he spoke quietly, words she could not understand, but his tone was calming. They were both exhausted. The human's injuries were severe, but he did not show it fully. Every time he adjusted her, she noticed the faint tremor in his hands. Every time she tried to speak, he encouraged her with gestures to wait, to rest. At one point, she tried to sit up again. Pain flared instantly. He caught her quickly, holding her upright against his chest. He whispered something, and she understood the meaning without knowing the words. "You are not alone." The alien warrior closed her eyes, leaning against him. She had fought in many battles, faced countless enemies, and endured pain she thought unbearable. But she had never felt anything like this. Someone choosing her life over safety, risking everything for her. Outside, the wind howled through the broken city. The firelight flickered on their faces. For a moment, the alien warrior allowed herself to forget the battle, the war, the shame. She only felt the human beside her, alive, breathing, caring. Then the sound of distant engines shook the building. Enemy patrols were returning, and the world outside remained dangerous. The human's eyes snapped open. He pulled her closer, supporting her fragile body. His face was serious, focused. He had no intention of leaving, but he was planning their next move. Carefully, the alien warrior understood that their survival depended on both of them. He would not leave her, and she could not leave him. They were trapped together in a world of fire and blood, forced to rely on each other. Hours passed again. The humans set up a small perimeter using rubble and old machinery, creating a temporary shelter. He applied more bandages, gave her water, and even attempted to feed her small amounts of nutrition from a pack he carried. She watched him, unsure of how to repay this kindness. Words were not enough, and her body was too weak to fight, too weak to move. Then, movement outside, something heavy, something large. The alien warrior froze. The human's hand went to his weapon instinctively. He gestured her down behind a pile of debris. The sound came closer. They waited. Shadows passed the entrance, voices sharp and commanding. Enemy machines rolled past, scanning the area. The human held her down, pressing her to the ground. Time stretched unbearably. Finally, the machines moved on. The human exhaled slowly and looked at her. He nodded toward the exit, then pointed to her legs and shook his head. She understood. She could not walk. He was going to carry her again. Fear and anger surged through her. She could not fight anymore. She could not walk. She could not even move without causing herself pain. And yet, she had to trust him. She had no choice. The human lifted her once more, grunting with effort. Her blood stained his armor again. Pain flared. She clenched her teeth. Outside, the world was dangerous, alive with enemy presence. They had to move quickly, silently. Step by step, the human carried her through the ruins, stopping occasionally to check for patrols. He whispered words she could not understand, but his tone was commanding yet calm. He was guiding her, protecting her, keeping them both alive. Hours passed. The alien warrior began to see a strange truth. Despite her hatred for humans, despite the war, despite everything she had been taught, this human's actions told her something different. Humanity was not just about weapons or strength. It was about choices. It was about mercy, loyalty, and courage. For the first time, she felt that perhaps life could still have meaning, even after everything she had lost. And she realized, with a slow, painful clarity, that she might have to fight again. Not just for survival, but to repay the one human who refused to leave her behind. The night deepened. The firelight flickered, and in the ruins of a dying world, a human and an alien waited together for the next danger, for the next step, and for the chance to survive. The alien warrior's body ached, her wounds throbbed, and her chest felt tight from exhaustion. Yet the human marine continued to move her through the shattered remains of the city. Smoke curled through broken streets, and the sky glowed faintly red from distant fires. The air smelled of metal, dust, and burned flesh. It was a smell that would never leave her memory. They reached an abandoned research outpost built into a small crater. Its walls were cracked, windows blown out, and doors hanging off their hinges. The human lowered her carefully onto a broken floor. She tried to speak, but her throat still burned. He looked at her quietly, waiting. Then he tapped her arm and gestured to the dark interior. He wanted her to stay low. Inside, the air was cooler, but the silence was heavy. Outside, the world was alive with danger, but inside, it seemed frozen. Dust floated in the shafts of light from broken windows. The alien warrior studied the human. Ha 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 ha. He removed his helmet, showing bruises and cuts, and gently cleaned her bandages. He whispered words she could not understand, but the tone was soft, patient. Hours passed as they rested. The alien tried to understand his actions. Why did he risk everything to save her? He had no reason. He had orders to retreat, to leave behind anyone who slowed him down. Yet, he had chosen her, her enemy, someone who had fought her species with no mercy. Outside, shadows moved. Enemy patrols scoured the streets. Drones hovered overhead, scanning for life. The human checked each corner, listening to faint sounds, moving with practiced precision. He was careful but tired. Every step seemed to cost him more strength, yet he refused to stop protecting her. The alien warrior realized something she had never thought possible. Despite the war, despite centuries of hatred between their species, This human acted with a kind of loyalty she had never seen. Humans could choose their actions. They could act with mercy. The human finally spoke, slowly, pointing to the exit of the outpost. He then gestured to her wounds, shook his head, and pointed toward his chest. He meant, "I cannot carry you far without help. We need a plan." The alien warrior studied him carefully. Her pride burned inside her. She could not ask for help. She could not depend on anyone. But she had no choice. Without him, she would die. She nodded slowly. He understood. He pulled a small map from his pack, spread it on the floor, and pointed at various locations. He spoke quickly, words she could not follow, but gestures made it clear. The area was dangerous, the enemy strong, but there might be a way to escape. For the first time, the alien warrior realized she could contribute. Though she could not walk, she had knowledge of the enemy, of their tactics and weaknesses. She gestured toward the map, pointing at locations she had memorized from battles she had fought before. The human studied her carefully, his eyes narrowing. Then he nodded. He was listening. Together they began to plan. Every move had to be calculated. Every step could mean death. Outside they could hear the faint hum of patrols, the distant echo of explosions. Time was running out. Suddenly the outpost trembled. A distant bomb struck nearby. Dust fell from the ceiling. The alien warrior felt panic rise, but the human kept her steady. He pressed her close, whispered words she could not understand, but his calmness grounded her. They waited as the dust settled. Outside, footsteps drew closer. Enemy drones hovered at the entrance, scanning for heat signatures. The human signaled her to stay low. He pointed to a small ventilation shaft at the back of the room. It was too narrow for him, but just wide enough for her to move with some assistance. The alien warrior hesitated. She had never crawled through such confined spaces before. Fear and pain made her freeze. The human knelt beside her. He gestured again, showing that he would help guide her through. Slowly she nodded, trusting him more than she wanted to admit. Step by step, he helped her through the shaft. Her arms ached, but she kept moving. Outside, patrols passed. She heard their voices, sharp and harsh, but the human blocked the worst of the sound. When she finally reached the end of the shaft, she collapsed, exhausted. He caught her gently, whispered words, and helped her stand. Once they were both inside a small hidden room, the human checked her wounds again. He cleaned her injuries, applied more bandages, and gave her water. She drank slowly, grateful for the care, though she did not show it. Pride was difficult to set aside. Hours passed. The human set up a small perimeter, using broken walls and debris to create cover. He checked the exits constantly, listening for danger. The alien warrior rested, though every moment reminded her of her weakness. She had no legs, no mobility, but she still had her mind and knowledge. The human noticed her watching him and gestured for her to speak. She tried, and words came slowly. "Why, help?" she asked, her voice weak. He looked at her, his eyes tired, filled with a strange determination. He tapped his chest and then pointed at her. Meaning was clear, because it was right, because he would not leave her, because humanity did not abandon the fallen. The alien warrior did not know how to respond. Her species had always believed humans were selfish, cruel, and reckless. Yet here was proof to the contrary. One human had chosen mercy over orders. Life over safety. She felt something shift inside her chest. Confusion. Gratitude. A spark of trust. Suddenly the sound of engines and voices grew louder. Patrols were closing in. The human checked the perimeter again, then pointed toward the exit. He was planning their next move. She realized she would have to act. Though she could not walk, she could still fight with her arms and weapons. She could use what knowledge she had to help him survive. Together, they might have a chance. The human knelt beside her, handing her a small energy weapon he had scavenged. She examined it carefully, nodding. Though her legs were gone, her arms were still strong. She could use this. She could still fight. Outside, the enemy patrols moved closer. They would find them soon. The alien warrior felt fear rise, but the human's calm presence steadied her. He would not leave. He had made that choice. Now she had to make hers. Step by step, they moved toward the exit of the outpost, using shadows and rubble to hide. Enemy patrols passed close by, their voices sharp. Once, a drone scanned the room they had left. The human pressed her to the ground, blocking the heat signature as best he could. The machine passed without detecting them. The alien warrior marveled at his skill. Even injured, he moved with precision, with awareness she had not expected. Humans were stronger than her species had believed, not just in weapons, but in choice, in courage, in ingenuity. Finally, they reached a narrow alley outside the outpost. The alien warrior sat heavily on the rubble as the human crouched beside her. He pointed to the horizon where faint lights marked the positions of human forces. If they could reach them, they might be safe. But the path was dangerous. Enemy patrols moved along the streets. Machines roamed the ruined city, scanning for life. Every step forward was a risk. The alien warrior realized that her survival depended not just on strength, but on trust. She had to trust the human, and he had to trust her knowledge of the enemy. They moved carefully, step by step. The human guided her, carrying her when necessary, shielding her when possible. The alien warrior directed him with gestures, showing where patrols moved and where traps lay. Together they formed a silent team, bound by necessity and trust. Hours passed. Exhaustion weighed on both of them. The alien warrior felt pain in every limb, every wound, every scar. The human was bleeding from his side, his movements slower, but he never complained. His focus never wavered. Finally, they reached the edge of the city. The human pointed to a fallen bridge spanning a crater. Beyond it lay open ground leading to human-controlled territory. But the bridge was unstable, damaged by bombardments. Crossing it would be dangerous. The alien warrior understood immediately. She could not walk, but they could move slowly, carefully. She could direct him, guide his steps, warn him of weak points. Together, they might survive. The human lifted her carefully. Step by step, they crossed the broken bridge. Dust fell from above, and the wind threatened to unbalance them. Enemy drones circled overhead. Each sound made their hearts pound. Halfway across, the alien warrior saw a patrol moving below the bridge. Machines and soldiers scanning for survivors. She shouted directions, pointing, warning the human where to step, where to avoid collapse. He listened, trusting her, relying on her knowledge. At last, they reached the far side. The human set her down carefully, brushing dust from her armor. Both of them were exhausted, bleeding, and bruised, but alive. For the first time in hours, they had a chance. The alien warrior looked at him, and though words were not needed, she understood. This human had saved her life. He had chosen her when the world had abandoned her. She felt a strange warmth, an unfamiliar connection forming between them, and she realized that the war, the pain, and her loss had not destroyed her spirit. She had survived, and with this human at her side, she might even fight again. Outside, the city lay in ruins. The fires still burned. The sky glowed red and black. But inside, in a small clearing beyond the bridge, two warriors, one human, one alien, rested, planning their next move in silence, knowing that survival depended on trust, courage, and the choice to stand together. The open ground beyond the broken bridge felt empty and dangerous. There were no walls to hide behind, no deep shadows to rest in. The wind moved freely here, carrying ash and dust across the land. The alien warrior lay against a low rise of stone while the human marine crouched beside her, watching the horizon. Both were exhausted. Both were wounded, but neither spoke of stopping. The human checked his communicator again. It made a weak sound, then went silent. He frowned and tapped it, but there was no response. Whatever signal he hoped for was not coming. He looked at the alien warrior and shook his head. No help. Not yet. She understood. The enemy still controlled most of this area. Human forces were far away, busy fighting on other fronts. If they stayed here too long, patrols would find them. If they moved too fast, they would be seen. Every choice was dangerous. The alien warrior forced herself to sit up. Pain shot through her body, but she ignored it. She pointed toward the far hills, then traced a rough shape in the dirt with her finger. The human leaned closer, watching carefully. She showed him the outline of an enemy control zone, a supply hub, a place where power and signals flowed through the battlefield. The human's eyes narrowed. He understood now. If that hub went dark, enemy patrols would lose coordination. Drones would fail. Scanners would weaken. It would create chaos. It would also draw attention. The human looked at her, then at the distant lights. He thought for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. If they wanted to survive, they needed confusion. They needed the enemy to look elsewhere. He helped her shift into a more comfortable position and checked her bandages again. Blood had soaked through in places, but the bleeding was slower now. He tightened the wraps and gave her water. She drank, then took a slow breath. They moved at dusk when the light was weakest and shadows were long. The human carried her again, his steps careful and slow. Every few meters he stopped to listen. She watched the terrain, pointing when she saw signs of enemy movement, warning him of patrol paths and hidden sensors. As they moved closer to the supply hub, the air changed. It hummed softly, filled with energy. Towers rose from the ground like broken teeth, cables running between them. Lights blinked in steady patterns. Enemy machines moved along set paths, guarding the area. The human lowered her behind a pile of broken metal and crouched beside her. He pointed to the towers, then to his explosives. He spoke softly, his voice calm but firm. He would place the charges. She would guide him. The alien warrior felt a surge of purpose. She had lost her legs, lost her place in her army, but here she was again, planning a strike, fighting, helping. She nodded. The human slipped away, moving low and fast. She watched him go, her heart pounding. Without him beside her, the world felt colder. She focused on the task, watching the patrols, tracking their movements. When she saw a gap, she raised her hand and signaled. He paused, then moved again. Minutes stretched into long, painful silence. She could hear her own breathing, feel the ground vibrating faintly under distant machines. Once a drone passed close overhead. She flattened herself against the dirt, holding her breath until it moved on. Then something went wrong. A patrol changed direction without warning. I The human was still exposed, halfway to the tower. The alien warrior felt panic rise. She slammed her fist against the ground, trying to get his attention without making noise. It was too late. The patrol saw movement, weapons raised, shouts rang out. The human ran. The alien warrior grabbed the weapon he had given her earlier. Her arms shook as she aimed, but she fired anyway. Energy bolts streaked across the field, striking one of the machines. It fell, sparks flying. The human reached cover and returned fire. Explosions lit the area. Alarms began to sound, loud and sharp. Red lights flashed across the towers. There was no more hiding. The alien warrior continued firing, her teeth clenched against the pain. Each shot sent shock through her body, but she did not stop. The human placed the last charge and sprinted back toward her. Enemy fire chased him. Something struck his leg. He stumbled, almost fell, then forced himself upright and kept moving. The alien warrior screamed, a raw sound torn from her chest. She fired again, driving the enemy back just long enough. The human reached her and collapsed beside her, breathing hard. Blood poured from his leg. He tore open a bandage and wrapped it quickly, his face pale but focused. "Now," he said, pointing toward the towers. She understood. He pressed the trigger. The world exploded. Light and sound crashed together. The towers shattered, energy ripping through cables and machines. A wave of force rolled across the ground, throwing both of them flat. The alien warrior's vision went white. Her ears rang. When she could see again, the supply hub was burning. Smoke poured into the sky. Drones fell from the air, crashing into the dirt. Enemy patrols scattered, confused and broken. The human laughed once, a short, breathless sound. Then he groaned and went still. Fear gripped the alien warrior. She dragged herself toward him, her arms screaming in pain. She grabbed his armor and shook him. He opened his eyes slowly. He was alive. Relief hit her so hard she almost cried. She pressed her forehead against his shoulder for a moment, then pulled back, embarrassed by the gesture. He noticed anyway. He smiled weakly. They could not stay. The explosion would draw more enemies soon. The human struggled to sit up, but his leg failed him. He cursed softly. Now the balance had shifted. She looked at him, then at the burning hub, then at the distant hills. He had carried her for so long, protected her, saved her life more than once. Now it was her turn. She grabbed his arm and pulled, forcing him to look at her. She pointed to herself, then to him, then made a dragging motion. Her meaning was clear. He stared at her, shocked. "You can't?" he said. "You're hurt." She bared her teeth in what might have been a smile. She slapped the ground with her hand hard and shook her head. She would not leave him. Not now. Not ever. Understanding dawned in his eyes. He nodded. Together, painfully, they moved. She used her arms and shoulders, dragging herself and pulling him along with a strap from his pack. Every movement was agony. Her vision blurred. But she did not stop. Enemy forces began to regroup behind them. Shouts echoed through the smoke. Shots rang out, wild and angry. The alien warrior pulled harder. They reached a shallow trench and dropped into it just as fire tore through the space they had been in. Dirt rained down. Both of them lay there, gasping, hearts pounding. The human grabbed her hand. "Thank you," he said quietly. She looked at him, confused by the words, but clear on the meaning. She squeezed his hand back. They rested only a moment before moving again. The human leaned heavily on his weapon now, his leg useless. She guided him, watching the terrain, choosing paths that avoided patrols. Slowly, painfully, they made their way away from the burning hub. Behind them, the enemy was in chaos. Systems failed. Patrols collided. Orders overlapped and broke. The battlefield shifted, just a little, because of two wounded survivors who refused to give up. As night fell, the fires from the destroyed hub lit the sky. The alien warrior looked back once, then forward again. She had lost much, but she had gained something she never expected, a bond, a promise. They moved into the darkness together, knowing the enemy would hunt them, knowing danger waited ahead, but also knowing this truth, now burned as strong as any fire. They would not leave each other behind. Night covered the land like a heavy blanket. Smoke from the burning supply hub drifted across the sky, hiding the stars. The ground was cold and rough beneath broken stone and ash. The alien warrior dragged herself forward, pulling the human marine behind her, inch by inch. Every movement sent pain through her arms and chest, but she did not stop. She refused to stop. The human leaned on her shoulder when he could, his injured leg useless. Blood stained the dirt behind them. His breathing was uneven, but he stayed awake, forcing himself to move. He watched the darkness ahead, listening for sounds of pursuit. Behind them, the enemy searched in confusion. Orders overlapped. Machines moved without clear direction. The explosion had done its work. For now, they reached a shallow ravine where the land dipped and shadows gathered. The alien warrior slipped down first, then helped guide the human down beside her. They pressed themselves against the stone wall as a patrol passed above, their lights sweeping the ground. Neither moved, neither breathed. The patrol passed. When the danger faded, the human let out a slow breath and closed his eyes for a moment. The alien warrior watched him closely. His skin was pale. His wounds were worse than she thought. If he lost consciousness, she did not know if she could move him alone. She slapped the ground lightly to get his attention. He opened his eyes. She pointed to his leg, then to her pack, then made a cutting motion. He understood. He pulled out a small medical tool and handed it to her. Her hands shook as she worked, but she focused, remembering battlefield training from her own kind. Stop the bleeding. Slow the pain.
Keep him alive.
He hissed once but did not pull away. When she finished, he nodded in thanks. He tried to smile, but it did not quite work. They rested there for a while, letting their bodies recover as much as they could. The ravine protected them from the wind, but the cold still crept in. The alien warrior felt weakness spreading through her arms. She could not keep dragging him much longer. Lights appeared in the distance. Human lights. The human marine noticed too. He sat up straighter, eyes sharp despite exhaustion. He pointed toward the lights, then to the sky, then shook his head. It was not safe yet. The enemy would be watching those same lights. They needed to be careful. As they moved closer, the sounds of battle faded behind them. The front lines were shifting. The explosion had forced the enemy to pull back in places. Human forces were advancing. The alien warrior felt fear rise again. What would happen when they reached humans? Would they see her as an enemy? Would they shoot her without listening? She looked at the human beside her. He met her gaze and seemed to understand. He shook his head firmly and pointed to himself, then to her. He would speak for her. He would protect her. That promise gave her strength. They moved again, slowly, carefully, using every shadow and dip in the land. Twice they froze as enemy drones passed overhead. Once they were nearly seen, but the human threw a small device into the distance. drawing attention away. It was a risk, but it worked. Finally, they reached the edge of human-controlled territory. Human soldiers moved between armored vehicles and temporary shelters. Medical tents glowed with soft light. The smell of fuel and medicine filled the air. The human Marine raised his hand weakly and called out, "Kh!" Weapons snapped toward them instantly. Shouts rang out. The alien warrior froze, her heart pounding. She raised her hands slowly, showing she carried no weapon. Pain made her movements slow, but she forced herself to stay visible. The human spoke quickly, his voice urgent but calm. He pointed to her wounds, then to his own, then to the burning horizon behind them. He spoke again, louder this time. A human officer stepped forward. His eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. A human Marine, wounded and exhausted. An alien warrior, legless and bleeding. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then the officer lowered his weapon.
"Get medics," he said. Everything moved fast after that.
Medics rushed forward, lifting both of them onto stretchers. The alien warrior flinched as hands touched her, but the human Marine reached over and grabbed her hand. She held on tightly, grounding herself. They were rushed into the medical tent. Bright lights hurt her eyes. Machines beeped. Voices spoke quickly, calmly. The smell of antiseptic was strong. The alien warrior drifted in and out of consciousness. She felt pain, then relief, as medicine flowed into her system. She heard voices arguing nearby. "She's enemy," one voice said. "She's a patient," another replied. "She helped destroy the hub," the human Marine said weakly. "She saved my life." Silence followed. The alien warrior opened her eyes just enough to see the officer standing at the foot of her bed. He studied her carefully. There was no hatred in his eyes, only caution. "She stays," he said finally.
"We treat all wounded here." Something inside her chest loosened. Days passed.
When she woke fully, she was in a clean medical bay. Her body felt strange, lighter in some ways, heavier in others. She looked down and saw smooth coverings where her legs had once been. No pain now, just absence. The human Marine lay in a bed nearby, asleep. Tubes ran from his arm. His face was relaxed for the first time since she had met him. Human doctors moved quietly around the room. One noticed her awake and approached slowly. He spoke gently, explaining her condition with simple words and gestures. She listened, understanding enough. She would live. Walking again was uncertain, but survival was no longer in question. Later, a group of human officers entered the room. With them came unfamiliar alien figures, prisoners from earlier battles. The alien warrior tensed, expecting anger or shame. Instead, they listened. She told her story in broken words and gestures, helped by translators. She spoke of being left behind, of the human who stayed, of the supply hub and the chaos it caused, of choices made in fire and pain. The room grew quiet as she finished. The human Marine spoke too, backing her words, explaining her actions, her courage. He did not exaggerate. He did not hide her past. He simply told the truth. The officers exchanged looks. Information from the destroyed hub was already spreading through enemy ranks. Confusion was growing. The alien warrior's testimony matched intercepted data. She was not just a survivor. She was a witness. Word spread quickly. Human soldiers whispered about the alien who fought beside one of their own, about the enemy warrior who refused to let a human die. Some looked at her with suspicion, others with curiosity. She noticed something else, too: respect. One evening, the human Marine was able to sit up. He looked at her and smiled, tired but genuine. "You did it," he said softly. She tilted her head, confused. "You showed them we're not just enemies," he continued. "You showed them we're people." She did not have a word for what she felt then. It was not pride. It was not relief. It was something deeper: purpose. Days later, a high-ranking human commander came to see her. He spoke plainly. The war was changing. The enemy was fractured. Some factions wanted peace. Others wanted revenge. Her story mattered. Her survival mattered. She was asked a question she never expected. Would she speak again to others if needed? She thought of the battlefield, of being left to die, of a human lifting her when no one else would. She nodded. The human Marine watched her from across the room, a small smile on his face. Outside, ships lifted into the sky. The war was not over. Not yet. But something had shifted on a world burned by hate and fire. One act of mercy had spread like a quiet flame, and neither of them would ever be the same again. The alien warrior opened her eyes to a world that smelled of medicine, metal, and faint ozone. The bright lights above hurt her vision, but she forced herself to stay awake. Her body felt different. Heavier in some ways, lighter in others. Her legs were gone, replaced with smooth prosthetics that gleamed faintly under the medical lights. She flexed them slowly, testing balance and movement. It was strange, almost unreal. Yet she could walk again. The human Marine lay in the bed beside her, resting, but awake enough to notice her movement. His arm was still bandaged, and he leaned on the edge of the bed to watch her carefully. He smiled, a small, tired smile, and nodded. She returned it with a hesitant gesture. Words were unnecessary between them now. Actions had already spoken louder than any sentence ever could. The door opened, and a group of officers and doctors entered. Some were human, others were alien diplomats, their armor and clothes different from anything she had seen before. She stiffened instinctively, ready for judgment, for anger, for rejection. She had been an enemy once, had fought and killed their people. Now she stood on legs that humans had built for her, protected by the very species she had once fought. The highest-ranking officer stepped forward, a tall human with sharp features and calm eyes. He spoke slowly, clearly, so she could follow.
"You have seen humanity," he said.
"You have seen mercy. You have seen courage. We need you to help others understand what you now know." The alien warrior's eyes narrowed. She had never been a diplomat, never a messenger. She had been a soldier trained for combat and survival, not words or politics. But she understood the weight of what he meant: her experience, her survival, her witness to one human's choice could change the course of many lives. She nodded slowly. It was a decision, not easy, but necessary. Outside, the war still raged in scattered pockets, but the chaos caused by her and the human Marine's actions at the supply hub had already spread. Enemy factions were confused, disorganized, and vulnerable. Messages from their own soldiers, intercepted and analyzed, revealed cracks in loyalty. Some were willing to listen. Some were ready to negotiate. The balance was fragile, and her voice could tip it. Days passed. She trained with her new legs, learning to move again, slowly at first, then with more confidence. She could walk, run, and even stand for long periods. The pain of old injuries lingered, but the human beside her encouraged her constantly, helping her regain strength. He had recovered enough to move without assistance, though scars and bandages remained. Together, they began to walk through the camp, observing human soldiers, their behavior, and how they treated one another. The alien warrior realized something profound. Humans were strong not just because of weapons or armor, but because of choice. They chose to help, to protect, to stand by each other, even when it was dangerous, even when it cost them, even when they had no reason but belief in what was right. She had never seen this in her own people. Honor, strength, loyalty, yes, but compassion in the face of risk was rare. She spoke to small groups of humans at first, slowly gaining confidence. She told her story in simple words, gesturing, showing the scars and prosthetics that proved her survival. She spoke of the human Marine, of how he had refused to leave her, of how he had carried her through fire and smoke, how he had saved her life when the world had abandoned her. The humans listened. They nodded. They respected what she said. Then came the alien diplomats. Some were wary, suspicious, even angry. She understood. She had been their soldier, their weapon, their enemy. She had killed their people, even while fighting for survival. Now she was walking among humans, alive, and speaking to both sides. Some whispered that she was a traitor. Others whispered that she was a bridge, a chance to understand. She kept walking, speaking, and demonstrating what she had learned. Every day the human Marine stayed by her side. He encouraged her, supported her, defended her. Soldiers on both sides began to notice. Whispers turned to conversations. Conversations turned to cautious trust. Weeks passed, her story spread through camps and battlefields alike. Human soldiers began treating alien prisoners with care, questioning old assumptions. Alien soldiers began questioning orders that demanded absolute violence. She had not only survived, but she had become a living symbol, a reminder that life, mercy, and courage mattered more than blind obedience. One evening, she stood on a hill overlooking a small valley where both human and alien forces had gathered. Fires burned in the distance. Soldiers moved among each other, cautious but curious. She turned to the human Marine beside her. He smiled and pointed to the valley. They had worked together, risked everything, and now a fragile peace might be possible. She looked at him. The man who had carried her, protected her, believed in her when no one else would. She wanted to speak, but words felt inadequate. Instead, she extended her hand. He took it, gripping firmly, understanding everything without a single word. The next day, a meeting was arranged. Commanders from both sides, humans and aliens, gathered in a neutral space. The alien warrior was asked to speak. She walked forward on her prosthetic legs, strong and steady. Her eyes scanned the room. Weapons were present, yes, but so were people willing to listen. She told her story simply. She spoke of war, of loss, of pain, of fear. She spoke of the human who had refused to leave her. She spoke of what she had learned about humans, about choice, about mercy. Silence followed, then questions, then cautious conversation. It was not peace. Not yet. But it was understanding, and understanding was enough to start. Months passed. The alien warrior continued to act as a bridge. She trained new soldiers, taught them lessons from both sides, and helped medics treat injured humans and aliens alike. She walked among the wounded, the frightened, the lost, offering guidance, support, and hope. She had become more than a soldier. She had become a symbol of what humanity could inspire in even the most hardened warrior. The human Marine stood beside her often. He no longer needed support for movement, but he stayed by her side. They shared stories, quiet moments, and the small joy of survival. He had risked everything for her, and she had learned that strength was not only in the body, but in choice, in loyalty, in standing for life when all else seemed lost. One evening they stood on the same hill overlooking the valley. Fires burned softly in the distance. Soldiers from both sides moved cautiously among each other, repairing equipment, sharing supplies. The alien warrior flexed her legs, feeling the strength and balance in them. She had been given life twice now, once by survival, once by the humans who had built her new legs. The human Marine smiled at her. He nodded toward the valley. They had made a difference. The war had not ended, but hearts had shifted. Decisions had been questioned. Lives had been saved. And a seed of peace had been planted. She looked at him and understood something profound. Humanity was not in its weapons, its armor, or its ships. Humanity was in its choices, in the willingness to save, to protect, to act when no one else would. That one act of mercy had changed her. It had saved her life. It had changed the course of a battle. It had shown that even enemies could find common ground. The alien warrior took her first confident steps across the hill, the prosthetic steady, strong, and reliable. Each step reminded her of every battle, every loss, every moment she had thought she was finished. And each step reminded her that she was alive because someone had refused to leave her behind. The human Marine walked beside her, steady and strong. They looked at the valley below, at the fragile beginnings of understanding between soldiers of different worlds. For the first time in her life, the alien warrior felt a calm certainty. She had survived. She had learned. She had grown. And she would continue to fight, not for hatred, not for blood, but for life, for mercy, for the chance to show that even in a world of war, one choice could inspire many. The sky above was no longer red with fire, but tinted with the soft colors of dawn. A new day was beginning, and with it, hope spread like the first light across the battlefield. She took a deep breath. The human Marine squeezed her hand. Together they stepped forward, not as enemies, not as soldiers, but as proof that humanity never leaves the fallen behind. And in that simple truth, the alien warrior found peace. The war would continue. Battles would rage, lives would be lost, but one act, one choice, one refusal to abandon another had shown the possibility of something greater. She walked forward. He walked with her,